The most advanced civilization in the galaxy had defeated death itself, until one fragile alien girl lay dying on a crystal floor, and the only hope left was a human with a metal scalpel and steady hands. Dr. Ilara Vance never expected her simple surgical kit would become the most important technology on an alien world. The transport vessel descended through violet clouds toward the glowing planet of Aetheris 9. Below, the alien capital shimmered like living glass under 3 silver suns. Towering structures curved upward like frozen waves, glowing softly with blue and white light. Ilara stood silently near the viewing window. She was not a diplomat, not a politician, not a famous scientist. She was a trauma surgeon. On Earth, she worked long nights in crowded emergency rooms, saving lives with skill, instinct, and sometimes nothing more than basic tools and stubborn determination. Now she was humanity's medical representative to the Valorians, a species known across the galaxy as masters of biological science. They could regrow limbs, reverse aging, cure diseases before symptoms even appeared. Humans were centuries behind. Or so everyone believed. When the ship landed, Valorian officials welcomed them with elegant grace. The aliens were tall, slender, with luminous silver skin and deep blue eyes that reflected light like water. Their movements were calm and controlled. Their voices soft and melodic. Their leader, Archon Cerealis, greeted the humans warmly. "Welcome, people of Earth. Today marks unity between evolving minds." Ilara bowed politely. Around her neck hung a small metal stethoscope. It looked primitive against the glowing architecture surrounding her. The Valorians led the delegation to their central knowledge hall. At its center stood their greatest treasure, a massive crystalline structure called the core spire. It held centuries of cultural memory and scientific advancement. It was not just technology. It was their history. Cerealis spoke proudly. "We have eliminated suffering from our civilization. Pain is obsolete. Injury is corrected instantly. Death is no longer natural." Ilara listened carefully. Something in those words unsettled her. Eliminated suffering. On Earth, suffering was tragic, but it also forced growth. It created adaptation. It built strength. Later that evening, during a ceremonial gathering beneath floating light orbs, something went terribly wrong. A sudden vibration shook the hall. A deep cracking sound echoed like thunder. Before anyone could react, the core spire fractured. The massive crystal structure collapsed in a storm of razor-sharp shards. Gasps filled the chamber. When the dust settled, a single figure lay unmoving near the shattered base. Liren, the Archon's daughter. She had been standing closest to the spire. Hundreds of microscopic crystal fragments had embedded into her nervous system when it exploded. Valorian medics rushed forward instantly. Advanced scanners surrounded her body. Holographic screens flickered with complex neural maps. Golden healing energy pulsed through the air. Ilara stepped back, watching. The Valorians worked with incredible speed. Nanite swarms entered Liren's bloodstream. Quantum regeneration beams activated. But something was wrong. "Fragments too fine," one medic whispered. "They resonate with neural frequencies. Regenerative fields amplify interference." Ilara frowned. The crystals were interacting with the alien nervous system. Their technology worked by overwhelming damage with powerful regenerative force. But this required delicacy. Precision. The Archon's calm mask finally broke. "Save her," he commanded. Hours passed. Each attempt failed. The stronger the machines pushed, the worse the neural feedback became. Liren's body trembled violently. Her luminous skin dimmed. The Valorians had never faced a problem they could not overpower. Until now. Finally, their chief medical director turned slowly toward the humans. "There is nothing more our systems can do." Silence filled the hall. The most advanced healers in the galaxy were helpless. Ilara's heart pounded. She stepped forward carefully. "May I examine her?" Several Valorians hesitated. Their eyes flickered with uncertainty. A human? With primitive tools? But the Archon nodded once. "Proceed." Ilara knelt beside Liren. Up close, she could see tiny entry wounds across the alien skin. Nearly invisible. Her breathing was shallow. Ilara did not activate scanners. She placed her fingers gently against Liren's neck and closed her eyes. She felt the rhythm. Irregular. She studied the tremors. Localized. Not full neural collapse. The crystals were lodged along micro-nerve pathways, too small for machines to isolate without destroying surrounding tissue. Machines required targeting fields. Humans used touch. Ilara opened her medical case. Inside were simple instruments. Fine microforceps. Surgical thread. A handheld magnification lens. Nothing glowed. Nothing hummed. Just metal and skill. The Valorians watched in disbelief. "You cannot possibly see the fragments," one healer said softly. Ilara replied calmly. "I don't need to see all of them. I just need to find the ones causing the cascade." She made a tiny incision, smaller than the width of a fingernail. Careful. Slow. Every movement controlled. She located the first crystal shard lodged near a neural junction. Instead of blasting it with energy, she gently stabilized the surrounding tissue first. Then, with steady hands developed from years in chaotic Earth emergency rooms, she removed it. Liren's tremors reduced slightly. A murmur spread through the chamber. Ilara continued. One fragment at a time. Not overpowering. Not forcing. Listening to the body. Understanding the reaction. After removing several critical shards, she paused. The remaining microfragments were too deep to remove individually. She studied the crystal dust. Then an idea formed. "What material is the core spire made of?" she asked. "Resonant kephrite crystal," a Valorian replied. "Does it respond to harmonic frequency shifts?" "Yes." Ilara nodded slowly. "Then don't overpower it. Detune it." Confusion filled the room. She explained quickly. "On Earth, when small glass fragments are embedded in muscle, sometimes we use vibration to loosen them safely before extraction. Not high energy. Controlled resonance." The Valorians had never needed such techniques. Their medicine skipped struggle. But Ilara adjusted a low-frequency sonic tool from their equipment. Not maximum power. Minimum. Gradual increase. She calculated a harmonic offset slightly outside the crystal's neural resonance range. Now. The soft vibration spread gently through Liren's body. Under magnification, tiny crystal particles shifted microscopically. Loosening. Breaking alignment. No destructive surge. Just subtle persuasion. Ilara carefully extracted the newly freed fragments. Minutes felt like hours. Then, Liren's breathing stabilized. Her skin regained its glow. Her neural readings leveled. Silence. Then a soft gasp. Liren's eyes opened. The Valorians froze in stunned disbelief. Their machines. Powerless. A human surgeon. Successful. The Archon stepped forward slowly. "How?" Ilara looked at her simple metal tools. "You tried to defeat the injury," she said gently. "I just listened to it." For the first time in centuries, Valorian medicine had learned something new. And humanity, the so-called primitive species, had just saved the future of a galactic civilization. But this was only the beginning. Because the core spire had not shattered by accident. And somewhere in the shadows of space, someone had just realized that humans were far more dangerous than anyone expected. The Valorians believed the crisis was over when Liren opened her eyes. They were wrong. As Liren slowly sat up, supported by her father, a new alarm echoed through the great hall. It was not the panicked sound of medical failure. It was deeper, older, a warning system that had not been activated in generations. The shattered core spire began to glow, not with its usual calm blue light, but with a pulsing red fracture pattern spreading through the remaining crystal foundation. Ilara stepped back as Valorian technicians rushed forward again. "What is happening?" Archon Cerealis demanded. A technician projected a holographic display into the air. Energy waves flickered across it like violent storms. The core's memory lattice is destabilizing, the technician said. Something triggered a harmonic cascade before the collapse. Ilara's mind sharpened. Harmonic cascade, she repeated. Yes, the technician replied. An external frequency must have matched the spire's structural resonance. Ilara froze. Matched resonance. The same principle she had just used to save Liren. But instead of detuning gently, someone had overloaded it. This wasn't an accident, she said quietly. The Valorians turned toward her. You suggest sabotage? One healer asked, disbelief in his voice. Ilara met his gaze steadily. I suggest someone understood your weakness. Silence fell. The Valorians had built their civilization around perfection. Around advanced systems that could calculate everything. But perfection can create blind spots. Ambassador Darius Hale, the human diplomatic lead, stepped forward. Do you have enemies? Valorian officials exchanged uneasy glances. There are species who resent our advancement, Cyrilis admitted. But none would dare attack us directly. Then they wouldn't attack directly, Ilara said. They would attack indirectly. Through your greatest strength. The core spire flickered violently again. Suddenly, several Valorian technicians collapsed to their knees, clutching their heads. Neural overload. The same type of interference Liren had experienced, but now transmitted through the spire's network. The core was connected to their entire planetary infrastructure. Energy, communication, medical systems, everything. And it was destabilizing. Disconnect the lattice, someone shouted. We cannot, another replied. It is integrated at a molecular level. The Valorians had woven their technology into the very fabric of their world. There was no off switch. Ilara felt the weight of realization settle over her. You built a system that cannot fail, she said softly. So you never learned how to survive when it does. Her words were not cruel. They were honest. Another surge pulsed outward. Lights across the hall flickered. Outside the transparent walls, distant towers dimmed. If the cascade continued, it could cripple the entire planet. Cyrilis turned to the human delegation. Can Earth assist us? Darius hesitated. Our technology is not comparable to yours. Ilara stepped forward again. Maybe that's exactly why we can help. All eyes turned toward her. Our systems are not integrated like yours, she continued. We still use redundancy. Manual overrides. Isolated grids. Old methods mixed with new ones. The Valorians looked confused. Why would you maintain inefficiency? One asked. Ilara almost smiled. Because failure is normal for us. That answer unsettled them. On Earth, systems broke all the time. Power grids failed. Satellites malfunctioned. Networks crashed. Humans learned to adapt. To build backups. To improvise under pressure. Valorians had evolved beyond failure. And now they were unprepared for it. Ilara studied the energy projection. If the cascade is resonance-based, she said, then you don't need to overpower it. You need to break the pattern. How? Cyrilis demanded. Chaos. The word echoed strangely in the perfect hall. You need noise, she clarified. Unpredictable interference. Randomized frequencies injected into the lattice to disrupt the harmonic buildup. Valorian scientists exchanged skeptical looks. Our systems are calibrated for precision, one said. Randomization could damage them permanently. Ilara nodded. Yes, it could. Silence. On Earth, risk was part of every decision. Here, risk had been engineered away. Until now. Another surge rippled outward. More distant structures flickered dark. Liren, still weak but conscious, stepped forward slightly. Father, she said softly, she saved my life when your machines could not. Cyrilis closed his glowing eyes. He was a leader who had ruled instability for centuries. Now he faced uncertainty. Dr. Vance, he said finally, if we follow your strategy and it fails, Ilara met his gaze without fear. Then at least you will have tried something different. That was the most human answer possible. Cerealis turned to his engineers. Implement controlled frequency randomization across the secondary lattice channels. Shock spread across the hall. You are introducing imperfection into the core, one technician whispered. Yes, Cerealis said firmly. We are learning. The Valorians moved quickly. They recalibrated harmonic stabilizers and injected fluctuating noise patterns into the network. At first, nothing changed. Then the red pulses began to stutter. The smooth cascading waveform broke into irregular spikes. The harmonic overload could not sustain itself. Ilara watched the readings carefully. Increase variance, she instructed calmly. The Valorian engineers hesitated, then complied. The once perfect energy signature became chaotic, uneven, unpredictable. And slowly, the cascade weakened. The red glow faded to orange, then to faint amber. Finally, the core stabilized in a dim but steady blue. The hall was silent except for the quiet hum of recovering systems. Across the planet, lights flickered back on. Communication channels restored. Medical grids stabilized. The Valorians stood motionless. They had not defeated the threat with superior technology. They had confused it. Outsmarted it. With imperfection. Cerealis approached Ilara slowly. You introduced disorder to restore balance, he said quietly. Ilara nodded. On Earth, evolution favors those who survive mistakes, not those who avoid them. A junior technician rushed forward breathlessly. Archon, we have traced the source of the initiating resonance. A holographic star map appeared in the air. A transmission had originated from deep space. Not a physical attack. A signal. Precisely tuned to Valorian crystal resonance frequencies. Weaponized sound. A long-range destabilization attempt. Who? Cerealis asked. The map zoomed outward. A distant system highlighted in red. The Corthan Dominion. A species known for technological warfare and strategic conquest. They had not attacked Valorian ships. They had not launched missiles. They had studied Valorian perfection. And targeted its weakness. Cerealis's expression hardened. They believe us fragile because we have not known struggle. Ilara crossed her arms thoughtfully. They just learned you're not alone. For the first time, Valorian leaders looked at humanity not as students, but as allies. The Corthan had underestimated something critical. Humans were born in chaos, raised in failure, forged in adaptation. And when perfection collapses, humans thrive. But far beyond Aetheris 9, Corthan strategists were already analyzing new data. They had observed the disruption of their cascade. They had detected an unexpected variable. Human interference. And now, they would escalate. Because empires that rule through control fear one thing more than rebellion. Unpredictability. And humanity was the most unpredictable force the galaxy had ever encountered. The Corthan Dominion did not believe in war. They believed in correction. When a civilization grew too influential, too independent, too difficult to control, the Dominion adjusted the balance. Quietly. Precisely. Without open battle. And they had just discovered something deeply unsettling. The Valorians were no longer predictable. A new variable had entered the equation. Humans. In a distant system surrounded by red dwarf stars, Corthan analysts studied holographic data from the failed resonance attack. Tall, armored figures with dark metallic skin stood around a circular strategy chamber. Their eyes glowed faint amber as streams of numbers moved across the air. The harmonic cascade should have achieved full neural grid collapse, one strategist stated coldly. It did not, replied another. The Valorians introduced chaotic modulation into their lattice. Silence followed. Valorians do not embrace chaos, the first strategist said. No, the second answered. But humans do. The word sounded almost like a warning. Back on Aetheris 9, recovery efforts continued. Valorian engineers repaired damaged sections of the core spire while medical teams monitored those affected by the neural feedback surge. The crisis had passed, but confidence had not returned. In a quiet observation chamber overlooking the city, Ark and Cerealis met privately with Ilara and Ambassador Hale. "You were correct," Cerealis said. "The Corthan Dominion initiated the signal." Hale folded his hands. "We've had minor encounters with them near human expansion zones. They prefer manipulation over confrontation." "They study systems," Ilara added. "Find structural weaknesses. Then apply pressure." Cerealis nodded slowly. "Our entire civilization is built upon harmonic stability, precision, integration. We believed efficiency made us strong." "And it does," Ilara said gently. "But only until someone learns the pattern." The Valorians were quiet. Humans had lived through centuries of instability. Wars, disasters, economic collapses, pandemics, infrastructure failures. They built not just strength, but resilience. The difference was subtle, but critical. Suddenly, a planetary alert echoed through the chamber. This time, it was not harmonic resonance. It was orbital. A Corthan fleet had entered the outer boundary of Valorian space. 27 vessels. Black, angular, and silent. They did not fire weapons. They broadcast a message. A holographic projection filled the room. A Corthan Supreme Strategist appeared, tall, armored, expression unreadable. "Valorian authority," the figure said in a calm mechanical tone. "Your recent system instability has revealed structural inefficiency. The Dominion offers assistance in exchange for administrative integration." Hale whispered, "That's a polite way of saying surrender." Cerealis' eyes glowed brighter. "We will not submit." The strategist continued, "Your resistance probability is calculated at 12.4%. Ilara leaned slightly forward. "Based on old data," she murmured. The strategist's eyes shifted toward her. "Human representative," it said. "Your interference disrupted a calibrated correction. You are statistically insignificant." Ilara gave a small, almost amused smile. "Funny," she replied. "We hear that a lot." The transmission ended. Outside, Corthan ships repositioned, not aggressively, but strategically. They began deploying signal buoys around Valorian orbital lanes. Resonance emitters. Preparation for a second cascade. Stronger. Broader. This time targeting planetary defense grids. In the Valorian War Council chamber, tension filled the air. "Our defense systems rely on harmonic shield arrays," a general explained. "If they replicate the cascade at higher amplitude, our entire orbital network could destabilize." "Can you isolate sections?" Hale asked. "No. Integration is total." All eyes slowly turned to Ilara. She understood the unspoken question. Humans had fought wars without unified systems, without perfect coordination, sometimes without clear strategy. They improvised. "We can't beat them at resonance," she said carefully. "They're using your own strength against you." "Then what is the alternative?" Cerealis asked. Ilara took a deep breath. "Disconnect." The room erupted in shock. "Sever planetary integration," a general demanded. "That would cripple infrastructure." "Yes," Ilara replied calmly. "Temporarily. Decentralize. Break your systems into independent nodes." "That would create inefficiency," a scientist protested. "It would create survival," she corrected. Humans had learned this during cyber warfare centuries earlier. Centralized networks were powerful, but fragile. Distributed systems were messy, but durable. "If they can't predict the system," she continued, "they can't tune a frequency to collapse it." The Valorians hesitated. To them, fragmentation felt like regression. But to humans, it was evolution. Cerealis stood. "We will initiate planetary decentralization." The order echoed across the planet. For the first time in Valorian history, their unified grid separated into autonomous sectors. Communication slowed. Energy distribution fluctuated. Efficiency dropped. But the harmonic network no longer existed as a single target. In orbit, Corthan strategists detected the change immediately. Primary resonance model invalid, one reported. Recalculate. System architecture has diversified. Predictive modeling accuracy reduced to 47%. A rare pause spread across the Dominion fleet. Humans were contaminating the Valorian design philosophy. Uncertainty was spreading. The Corthan commander narrowed his glowing eyes. Deploy adaptive signal swarm. Small, fast drones launched from Corthan ships, emitting variable resonance patterns designed to test each sector independently. But now the Valorian system was no longer uniform. Each region responded differently. Some absorbed the signal. Some deflected it. Some fluctuated unpredictably. Human engineers aboard the diplomatic vessel began assisting Valorian technicians, introducing Earthborne cyber defense algorithms built for chaotic environments. Instead of maintaining perfect harmony, they introduced shifting noise fields, adaptive counterfrequencies, unpredictable modulation. The battlefield became messy, unstable, alive. For the first time, the Corthan Dominion encountered a civilization that did not behave according to optimized logic. Because logic alone does not define survival. Emotion does. Instinct does. Creativity does. As hours passed, the Corthan fleet struggled to establish a stable attack vector. Their predictive advantage eroded. One Corthan strategist finally spoke the unthinkable. The human variable introduces nonlinear adaptive response. The commander's voice hardened. Then we remove the variable. A new command transmitted through the fleet. Target the human vessel. Not the planet. The source of chaos. On the Valorian surface, alarms blared again. The human diplomatic ship detected weapons lock. Ambassador Hale looked at Ilara. "Well," he said quietly, "it seems we're no longer statistically insignificant." Ilara stared at the orbital display. 27 ships. 1 human transport. No heavy weapons. No advanced shielding. Just ingenuity. She took a slow breath. "Then let's show them," she said softly, "why humans never needed perfect odds to win." Above Aetheris 9, the real battle was about to begin. And this time, it would not be fought with superior power. It would be fought with imagination. The Corthan fleet expected fear. They expected surrender. They expected the small human transport ship to attempt escape. Instead, the human vessel did something completely irrational. It powered down. Every light went dark. Every engine signature vanished. On Corthan sensors, the ship became a drifting piece of debris. The Corthan commander narrowed his glowing eyes. "Malfunction?" he asked. "Negative," replied a strategist. "Power readings indicate deliberate shutdown." On the human ship, Ambassador Hale looked at Ilara in disbelief. "You shut off everything." "Not everything," she replied calmly. Inside the darkened control room, only a few analog instruments remained active. Old systems. Independent wiring. No network connection to external grids. Systems Valorians considered obsolete. Systems humans still trusted. Captain Imoni Rao, commander of the transport vessel, turned in her chair. "We've switched to manual thruster control. No digital signatures. No predictable energy pattern." Ilara nodded. "They can only target what they can model." The Corthan Dominion depended on predictive algorithms. They analyzed behavior, mapped reactions, calculated outcomes. Humans had learned something different over centuries of conflict. Sometimes the best strategy is to look irrational. "Prepare Drift Maneuver Delta," Captain Rao ordered. Without powering main engines, small bursts from cold gas manual thrusters nudged the ship sideways, altering its trajectory by tiny increments. No clear pattern. No stable signature. To the Corthans, the movement looked random. Inside the fleet command vessel, confusion grew. The target vector is inconsistent. Recalculate intercept. Trajectory variance exceeds predictive margin. The commander's tone hardened. They are a primitive species. Adjust targeting tolerance. High-energy targeting beams activated, sweeping across space to lock onto the drifting human craft. But each time the system adjusted, the ship shifted again. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just enough. The targeting algorithms struggled. Because humans were not following optimized escape logic. They were improvising. On the Valorian surface, Surrealis watched the orbital battle with rising tension. They cannot survive direct engagement, one general warned. Perhaps not, Surrealis replied quietly. But they do not fight directly. He was beginning to understand. Back on the human vessel, Ilara stood beside Captain Rao. They think in straight lines, Ilara said. Good, Rao replied. Because humans specialize in curves. The captain turned to her crew. Deploy package Echo. From a small side hatch, dozens of compact metallic objects drifted into space. Old satellite shells. Heat decoys. Scrap material from the ship's cargo. But inside each was a simple device, low-frequency emitters broadcasting inconsistent electromagnetic pulses. Noise. Chaos. Suddenly, Corthan sensors lit up with dozens of false signatures. Multiple targets detected. Energy fluctuations inconsistent. Which is the primary vessel? The Corthan commander's jaw tightened. The Dominion had perfected efficiency. But efficiency required clarity. Humans were muddying the battlefield. Then Captain Rao executed the second phase. She powered the ship's main engine for exactly 3 seconds. Then shut it down again. A burst of high-energy output flashed briefly across space, then disappeared. The Corthan fleet reacted instantly, firing toward the projected trajectory. But the human ship had already altered course using manual thrusters during engine shutdown. The Corthan weapons struck empty space. The Valorians, watching from below, gasped. A small human ship had just outmaneuvered a Dominion strike fleet. Inside the Corthan command chamber, tension rose for the first time. The human vessel exhibits non-patterned tactical behavior. Probability modeling degraded to 21% accuracy. The commander's voice grew colder. Then eliminate the Valorian surface instead. Force the human surrender. Energy began building within the fleet's primary harmonic cannons. Not targeting ships. Targeting the planet. On Aetheris 9, warning sirens howled. Surrealis turned sharply. They intend planetary destabilization. Valorian generals prepared defensive arrays, but decentralization meant shields were weaker than before. Human improvisation had saved them once. Now it had reduced their peak defense capacity. Surrealis understood the risk. Resilience over perfection. But resilience sometimes meant vulnerability. On the human ship, Ilara saw the energy spike on her analog monitor. They're switching targets. Captain Rao nodded grimly. We can't outmaneuver that. Silence filled the room. Then Ilara spoke quietly. They rely on harmonic precision. Yes. And their cannons require stable resonance calibration. Yes. She smiled slightly. Then let's give them instability. Captain Rao understood immediately. Open all decoy emitters. Maximum variance. The scattered debris devices increased their noise output, flooding space with unpredictable electromagnetic interference. But that wasn't enough. Ilara stepped toward the communications console. Valorian command, this is Dr. Vance. Surrealis appeared on the holographic screen. What do you require? Access to your old harmonic archives. Our archives. Specifically, your pre-unification experimental resonance frequencies. The unstable ones you abandoned centuries ago. Surrealis hesitated. They were considered flawed. Perfect, Ilara replied. Moments later, ancient Valorian frequency data streamed to the human vessel. Captain RAO uploaded the chaotic resonance patterns into the decoy network. Suddenly, space around the Corthan fleet became filled with overlapping harmonic distortions, old experimental tones, incomplete waveforms, unstable oscillations. The Corthan cannons attempted to calibrate. But harmonic weapons required precision tuning. And now the environment itself was unpredictable. Energy feedback rippled through their systems. Cannon stability compromised. Resonance interference escalating. On the Valorian surface, citizens watched in awe as Corthan ships flickered with internal overload flashes. The Dominion had built weapons to exploit harmony. They were unprepared for discord. One Corthan cruiser misfired. Its own harmonic beam rebounded off unstable interference waves and struck a neighboring vessel. Another ship's shield matrix destabilized. The battlefield became disordered. Imperfect. Alive. Inside the Corthan flagship, the commander finally spoke words never recorded in Dominion history. Retreat. One by one, the dark ships disengaged, folding into faster-than-light transit and vanishing from Valorian orbit. Silence returned to space. On the surface of Aetheris 9, lights shimmered back to steady glow. Valorians across the planet stood in stunned disbelief. They had not defeated the Dominion through superior force. They had survived through unpredictability, through imperfection, through human thinking. In the quiet aftermath, Surrealis met Ilara once more. "You did not overpower them," he said. "No," she answered softly. "We just made it impossible for them to predict us." Surrealis looked out at the stars. "For centuries, we believed advancement meant eliminating chaos." Ilara shook her head gently. "Chaos isn't the enemy. It's where creativity lives." Far away, within Corthan territory, Dominion analysts reviewed the encounter. One conclusion stood above all others. Humans could not be modeled. And a species that cannot be modeled, cannot be controlled. The galaxy had just witnessed something new. Not the rise of superior technology, but the rise of adaptive intelligence. And humanity had just earned a reputation far more powerful than fear. They were not the strongest. They were not the most advanced. But they were the most dangerous kind of ally. And the most dangerous kind of enemy. The stars above Aetheris 9 looked the same as they always had. Calm. Silent. Beautiful. But something fundamental had changed. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the Corthan Dominion had retreated without achieving its objective. Not because they were overpowered. Not because they were outgunned. But because they were outthought. And the species responsible was one the Dominion had labeled statistically insignificant. Humans. In the days that followed, Valorian engineers began rebuilding the core spire, but not as it had been before. This time, its design was different. It was no longer a single unified harmonic structure. Instead, it was modular. Segmented. Each branch capable of independent function. It was less elegant. Less perfect. But far stronger. Ilara stood beside Liren in the reconstruction chamber, watching the new crystal framework rise piece by piece. "You changed your greatest symbol," Ilara said quietly. Liren smiled softly. "We learned something valuable. Perfection without resilience is fragility in disguise." Ilara nodded. On Earth, humans had never had the luxury of perfection. Their cities had burned and been rebuilt. Their systems had failed and been redesigned. Their species had survived ice ages, plagues, and world wars. Survival was not about flawless design. It was about adaptation. Across the galaxy, news of the Valorian incident spread rapidly. Other civilizations reviewed the battle data. They replayed the moment when a small human ship powered down instead of fleeing. When it deployed scrap metal as decoys. When it used ancient, abandoned Valorian frequencies to destabilize advanced Corthan cannons. It was not technological superiority. It was creative thinking under pressure. And that terrified empires built on rigid control. On Earth, the United Planetary Council received the official Valorian communique. Ambassador Hale stood before the council chamber, projecting holographic recordings of the confrontation. "We did not win through force," Hale said calmly. "We won through flexibility." Council members listened carefully. One elder representative asked, "What does this mean for humanity's future among the stars?" Hale glanced at Ilara, who stood quietly at the side of the chamber. "It means," he said slowly, "we no longer need to chase superiority. We need to embrace what we already are. Imperfect, adaptive, creative, resilient." Weeks later, an unexpected message arrived at Valorian space. Not hostile, not threatening. Cawthon. A single vessel approached under neutral signaling. Cautiously, Valorian defenses monitored its approach. A Cawthon envoy requested diplomatic exchange. Inside the Valorian council chamber, the armored Cawthon representative stood across from Cyrillus and Ilara. "You have altered the strategic balance," the envoy stated. Cyrillus replied calmly, "We defended ourselves." The envoy's glowing eyes shifted toward Ilara. The Dominion's models cannot reliably predict human adaptive variants. Ilara folded her arms lightly. "Maybe you should stop trying to predict us." The envoy paused, a rare hesitation for a Dominion strategist. "The Dominion seeks stability." "And so do we," Cyrillus replied. "But stability through domination breeds resistance." The Cawthon envoy processed this. For the first time, they faced a concept not derived from efficiency metrics. Coexistence without control. It was inefficient, messy, uncertain, human. "We propose mutual observation rather than correction," the envoy finally said. It was not an apology, but it was a beginning. Months passed. The Valorian-Human alliance deepened. Joint research initiatives formed, not to eliminate chaos, but to understand it. Valorian harmonic science merged with human adaptive algorithms. Medical research expanded into new fields blending quantum regeneration with biological subtlety. Valorian healers began training in manual surgical techniques. Not because they replaced advanced medicine, but because now they understood something vital. Power must be paired with precision. Liren often visited Earth as part of a cultural exchange program. She walked through human cities filled with noise, movement, unpredictability. It overwhelmed her at first. But slowly, she began to appreciate it. On one visit, she stood beside Ilara on a hospital rooftop overlooking a busy skyline. Sirens echoed in the distance. Lights flickered from thousands of windows. "So much disorder," Liren said softly. Ilara smiled. "Yes. And yet, it functions." "Most days," Ilara laughed. Liren looked thoughtful. "Your species survives not because you eliminate weakness." "No," Ilara said gently. "We survive because we expect it." Below them, ambulances arrived at emergency entrances. Doctors rushed forward. Mistakes would happen. Adjustments would be made. Lives would be saved. Not through perfection. Through persistence. Far beyond, in Dominion space, Cawthon strategists updated their core doctrine. A new variable was permanently inserted into all predictive models. Human adaptive factor. Unquantifiable. It was the first time in Dominion history that uncertainty was officially acknowledged. And it began reshaping their entire philosophy. Because if one species could not be controlled through prediction, then maybe control itself was flawed. Years later, historians would look back at the Valorian incident as a turning point in galactic development. Not a war, not a conquest, but a shift in thinking. Humanity did not dominate the stars. They did not become the most advanced. They did not build the largest fleets. Instead, they became something far more influential. They became the species others called when perfection failed. When systems collapsed. When models broke. When hope required imagination instead of calculation. And in that role, humans thrived. Because on Earth, hope had never been guaranteed. It had always been built. One mistake at a time. One adjustment at a time. One impossible situation at a time. One evening, As Ilara prepared to return permanently to Earth, Cerealis stood with her at the landing platform. "You have changed our civilization," he said. Ilara shook her head softly. "No. You changed yourselves. We just reminded you that strength comes from more than power." Cerealis looked toward the stars. "The galaxy will remember this." Ilara followed his gaze. "Good," she said. "Because we're just getting started." The human transport ship lifted off, engines glowing steadily, imperfect, mechanical, reliable. As it vanished into the stars, a quiet understanding settled across Valorian space. Advanced alien medicine had failed one fragile life. A simple human trick had saved it. But that was only the surface. What humanity truly offered the galaxy was not technology. It was perspective. That failure is not the end. That chaos is not weakness. That imperfection is not shame. It is potential. And in a universe obsessed with flawless systems, humanity stood proudly as proof that the strongest force of all is the ability to adapt.